Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Assa Abloy Academy virtual training session, Sustainability Studio, Session 1, the Customer's Toolkit, with Amy Musanti. The session should last about 45 minutes, allowing time at the end for question and answer. During the session, your lines will be muted. However, you can use the Q&A icon to submit questions as we go along. We will reserve time at the end to answer those questions. The session is being recorded and should be available to view at a later date through Assa Abloy Academy. Within 24 hours, you will also receive an email showing your proof of attending. That can be used, submitted to your employer or to one of our industry association partners for continuing education units in lieu of issuing actual certificates of completion. In addition, Assa Abloy has over 50 online courses that are available at no cost. To get started, simply create an Assa Abloy Academy account and begin learning at your own pace. Let's turn things over to Amy. Welcome, Amy.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate it. It's very nice to spend some time with everyone this afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's session. I'm Amy Musanti. I am the Director of Sustainability at Assa Abloy, and I'm based in our New Haven, Connecticut headquarters office on a regular basis. I have spent over 14 and a half years with Assa Abloy, and I started in 2007 in a customer service position for a little company that some of you may be familiar with called Assa Inc. High Security Lock. In my role within the sustainability team, I support the entire United States, and I work very closely with our door security solutions, specifications, and sales teams. And I also work very closely with our customers. Today's session is focusing around the resources that you can utilize for sustainable building projects. And we're going to talk through a lot of those struggles that you may have when a green building certification program submittal comes across your desk and then the sheer panic sets in. So we're going to work on easing that just a little bit today. And so this will be the first session of many that we'll have in a series talking about LEED and talking about sustainability in general. During this workshop, we will explain current green building certification programs and trends. We'll define sustainability as it relates to doors, hardware, and accessories, because that's our personal favorite, of course. We'll clarify the steps of the LEED submittal process. And then we'll wrap up by finalizing some information around identifying resources for project managers. And that could be a project management team within an architectural firm, a design firm, a distributor, and a contractor, anyone that's involved in any part of the process of a submittal for a green building certification program. Before we get into any of the information around green building certification programs, I want to just be clear about what it means to be a sustainable product when it comes to doors, frames, hardware, accessories, and electronic access control. In many cases in the world of sustainability, those that are close to a project are thinking about sustainable products with a larger footprint in mind. So typically we think of HVAC, lighting, windows, furniture, and finishes as being the types of products that will ultimately be the biggest contributors to a sustainable or progressive built environment. And we at Assa Abloy have done a lot of work behind the scenes to develop products that contribute in many of the same ways that those other more visible, tangible products that I just mentioned have. So when we think about sustainable products in Division 8, we need to consider doors and frames, accessories, all types of locking solutions, electronic access control, door closers, power supplies, and glass solutions. So you'll see some pictures, examples of the types of products that, yes, have sustainability attributes to them that we probably weren't thinking about otherwise. So thermal resistance for the exterior building envelope is incredibly important when we're thinking about keeping in the heat or cold into the building so that we're not paying to heat or cool the outdoors, right? We take a look at low energy and regenerative access control solutions, door openings that are designed and tested as complete openings with all the components around it for acoustic control or sound attenuation. And then doors and accessories that are certified for low levels of chemical off-gassing. And we'll talk about that in further detail as we go on today when we get into the specifics of LEED. But truly the core around how doors and hardware can contribute is two main things, and that is focusing on reduction in cost and footprint, and then delivering healthy and transparent solutions. That's important because that's a cornerstone of the ASA ABLOY sustainability program overall, but it also plays a large part in the core message and the core drivers behind the main green building certification programs that are relevant in the United States as well as the entire world. So on that note, let's think about two important statistics here with some percentages behind them. And again, this type of information is what drives an industry to continue to do more around sustainability. So the first is, and hopefully those of you that are involved in green buildings have heard or learned about this information before. But number one is, buildings account for 40% of energy-related CO2 emissions in the United States. That is unbelievable. And the great thing about knowing this information is that we have the tools now today in this current year, for as far as we've come in this industry, to make changes to this percentage and start to reduce that footprint. So when we see a statistic like this, what we understand is what's right below it. We need energy efficient building products. And we see that across the board from a number of manufacturers, not just door and hardware manufacturers. Now, the other side of that is the 90%. And that is that we spend 90% of our time indoors. I think most of you listening in today are probably inside some sort of an interior structure at this point. Many of you probably don't have access to daylighting or views at this point. So we're in a confined space. And what that means is we as manufacturers and you all as experts within the built environment need to think about the health and wellness of the occupants of the building. And so that leads us to say we need healthy, responsible building products. And these two sections are really the basis for what we're going to talk about today around the most popular building certification programs. Something to remember about these programs is that they're optional, right? So when we think about our local codes and standards, those are not as optional. Green Building Certification Program is something that a building owner or an architect will decide they'd like to pursue. Okay, and then they go ahead and they make a monetary investment to go through with this certification program. So everything is optional. When you do receive a question from whatever stakeholder you're dealing with, though, around a green building certification program, that does mean that they've elected to go through with the certification process, and they're going to ask you a number of questions, information regarding the products that have been either specified, purchased, or installed in a building. Today, we're going to spend a lot of time in LEED, but before we get to LEED, I want to focus on a couple of other certification programs that you've either heard about already or you will at some point in the future as the industry continues to progress in a very positive and stringent direction. So the well building standard is managed by the International Well Building Institute. And this is a green building certification program that focuses very much on the health and wellness of the occupants of the building. So you'll see the focus areas on the right-hand side of your screen: air, water, nourishment, light, movement, community, mind, materials, sound, and thermal comfort. So a lot of what you see there is similar to LEED, and there is about a 25% overlap with the guidelines from LEED. But what's important with WELL is, number one, indoor air quality, including VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds, light exposure, and enhanced access to nature. So you may hear about biophilia or biophilic design, which means bringing the outdoors and bringing nature into the building so that the occupants are surrounded by it. Daylight design strategies, a large focus on circadian rhythm, thermal comfort and performance, sound barriers and sound reducing surfaces, healthy building materials, and microbe control. You're going to see kind of two common themes again here throughout. And so again, like we said before, there's that healthy building materials. And then there's also that focus on the occupants of the building. So thermal comfort, sound barriers, and enhanced access to daylight. Building on that is something called the Living Building Challenge, or LBC. We have a ton of acronyms in the industry already, so here's one more, LBC. This is a program administered by the International Living Future Institute, and it is known by far to be the most stringent building certification program in the US and in the world. What's important with the Living Building Challenge is material ingredient reporting, which that type of information is found in the declare label, which you see on your screen. Very much looks like an ingredient label or a nutrition label that we might see on the food that we eat. And that's kind of the idea, is consumer demands around product transparency have translated over into the commercial and institutional world. And that's where we get a lot of this documentation from. Because it exists from an educated consumer, and now we have it in our world of building materials. So Living Building Challenge also places a large focus on access to nature, responsible materials, and beauty. So focus on the decorative line of products. Many of you have worked with our colleague Sandy Matheny and the Good Design Studio. Those types of products would come into play heavily for the Living Building Challenge program as well. And as you see here, responsible materials is, again, that similar theme that we see running through all of these programs. Other programs are Passive House and Net Zero. And these are two that we're starting to just see become more and more popular in the recent years. And Passive House can be a little bit confusing because it has the word house in it. So we think that it pertains to a residential environment, but it got its roots in that way. And as it's grown in popularity, Passive House can be applied to any number of commercial or institutional buildings. And then you'll see Net Zero as well. So these two programs focus heavily on the reduction of energy for the entire operating footprint of the building. And there's also a very large focus in just keeping the exterior envelope completely airtight. So it's important to think about low energy electrified products, a major reduction in operating costs. Passive House is especially used right now in affordable housing because of the fact that it does give some reductions and savings over the entire life of the operating and footprint costs of a building. An airtight envelope, so we're thinking about exterior surfaces, of course, and then a focus on high performing products. So these are very advanced types of buildings. And contributions as part of a complete door system. So again, we're thinking, okay, it's really important that we need to seal up the building envelope. Where do our products come into play? So things to think about, obviously, are the doors and frames, as well as the continuous hinges, weather strip, door bottoms, and thresholds. So it really is interesting to see across the board with these different building certification programs is that every element around the door opening does have the potential to contribute in a very specific way to whatever those guidelines are within the Green Building Certification Program. We'll spend the rest of the time with a LEED deep dive because that's where we find most of the questions come through. And LEED is by far and away, the most common green building certification program in the United States and in the world. LEED is leadership in energy and environmental design. And for a very long time, the focus was around the operating footprint of the building. And what you'll see going forward, and what I've mentioned already, is that in addition to that operating footprint, the materials in the building and the health and wellness of the occupants are coming into play as well. So those of you that may have seen a LEED certified building before, you've probably seen the plaque on the outside of the building, and that shows that that entire building has gone through a certification process and has achieved a specific status within LEED. So on the back end of that, the work that you do to fill out your LEED submittal helps the project team in turn complete those documents that they need to eventually become certified and get that plaque on the outside of the building. So any of you that have filled out some submittals in the past for LEED, you had a part to play in getting a plaque on the outside of that building. So good job to you. Now with LEED, there are a lot of layers, and in many cases, as the program has continued to grow based on the demands of our industry, it gives this feeling of, okay, it's making our lives more difficult. We have to spend a lot more time researching and working to obtain this information from manufacturers, from their suppliers. And the intention is not to make our lives more difficult, but to continue to push the envelope so that we have this industry that's thinking about those two statistics that I talked to you about earlier. Is we play a part in 40% of the CO2 emissions buildings do in the United States, and we spend almost 90% of our time indoors at this point. So with LEED, you may receive, in whatever line of work you're in, you may receive or administer something that looks familiar to what you see on the bottom of the screen there. And that's an example of screenshot of a LEED submittal spreadsheet. And so what you would do is put in your product information, the cost, and then you're going to go across and check off and include supporting documentation for any of those areas where that specific product, from mostly a series level, will contribute across the board. So there are certain things to keep in mind, and these are the most relevant areas as far as sustainability is concerned right now in our industry. One is embodied carbon, and that data is found in our environmental product declarations, or EPDs, which we'll talk about. Material ingredient reporting, that data is found in a health product declaration, or what we call an HPD, and or a declare label, and we'll talk about those as well. Recycled content, that is probably the one that everyone is the most familiar with and is also sometimes the most difficult to come across. Third-party verifications like from Green Circle Certified and product end-of-life recycling programs, as well as low levels of chemical off-gassing. We'll spend a couple of moments on each of those line items as we go through the presentation today. But to be very clear, as far as doors and hardware are concerned, we have a number of opportunities to contribute, and that is through our type 3 product-specific EPDs, our health product declarations and declare labels, our third-party verified HPDs and declare labels, and then our lead contribution documents, which would include the recycled content that you would need to know. So don't panic, because we're going to talk about all of these line items in a little bit more detail as we go forward. Now, the big question that I always get is, why am I being asked so many questions, right? So you're going about your day and then you get an email with some lead questions, and it's coming from another team that you work with along the project timeline there. So depending on who you are within the project, at some point, the role that you play is going to have to work on a lead submittal. And so you're going to get any number of documentation or types of materials to complete. Sometimes it's in a PDF, sometimes it's a spreadsheet that you have to fill out. Other times it's just a Word document where you're checking off a few different things. But that request is coming from the fact that a project team is required to fill out this document right here. And this is a lead project checklist. So the team uses this to understand the feasibility of lead and to get a better understanding of where and what are the types of products that can help contribute. So once we've gone through this, then we've identified those products and we say, okay, we've checked them off the list. Now we need to actually dig in and get the backup data that actually demonstrates that these products will help us with all of these categories within lead. And that's why you get those questions about, can you provide an EPD? Do you have recycled content? Do you know what the type of off-gassing is for this product? Those questions stem from a lead project checklist. One of the areas that you'll find in the project checklist is an EPD. And within the EPD is a life cycle assessment. Now, you do not have to spend a ton of time reading through these entire documents. You're more than welcome to do that. In fact, we have a joke that if you have trouble sleeping at night, these are great documents to read because they're long and technical. For those that this information is relevant to, these are very important documents. And they're also great for the manufacturer because we can take this data and work to make our product better. And that in turn is something that is beneficial for the entire building project team and eventually the occupants of the building. So when you're asked for an environmental product declaration, you're actually submitting a life cycle assessment, and that's what's built into the EPD. So when you submit an EPD, you're sending along information for a product that contains all of the details around the entire life of the product, from its footprint regarding extraction of raw materials, transportation, manufacturing, distribution, packaging, installation, its energy use when it's in its installation phase, and then understanding what happens when the product reaches the end of its life, and then how are we properly and appropriately recycling or disposing of this product. And that's something that's very important for LEED. So when you're looking at your documentation, on the left-hand side of your screen, these are some examples of what you might see being asked for in a type of request. So you may have to say, do you have an EPD? Who is the program operator? What type of EPD do you have? And then in most cases, you want to use a product-specific type 3 EPD, and that example is on the right-hand side of your screen. So you've got to a series level, in this case, a Sargent 11 line lock, and that's the type of documentation that you would need to provide. So you'd select that you have this document, and then you'll attach the entire PDF to your submittal. Now with LEED v4, the guidelines for points are listed here. And again, you don't have to memorize all this information, but it's helpful to know, especially with the information at the bottom of the screen. So to achieve 1 point within LEED, the project teams needs to submit documentation for at least 20 different permanently installed products from 5 different manufacturers. And what you want to do here is take a look for either a product-specific type 3 EPD, which will count as one product, or a product-specific type 3 EPD that's been externally reviewed or third-party verified. That's going to give you 1.5 products, which gets you even faster to those 20 different permanently installed products that you need for this contribution. So an industry-wide generic EPD would be something like SDI has put together, which is, here's an EPD for a generic steel door. A product-specific type 3 EPD would be, here's an EPD for a Seco door Trio E. And that is the ultimate in what you'd want for EPDs. And the important thing to note here is that when you're working with documents from an organization with numerous manufacturers, each manufacturer, not the overall organization, counts as one. So you wouldn't count ASSA ABLOY and its manufacturers as one. You would count each manufacturer separately. So this does give you the opportunity to expand as far as contributions are concerned. So 5 different manufacturers would be, for example, Norton, McKinney, Sargent, Seco, and Securitron, not ASSA ABLOY, Kingspan, Armstrong, Saint-Gobain, and Mohawk. You can drill down into a manufacturing specific level for EPDs. This is the best way to explain that material ingredient reporting is very important for LEED. And we use the Twinkie example because you can get a very basic level of ingredients here and say, the ingredients of a Twinkie are cake and cream. If you'd like to be more stringent to a 1,000 parts per million level, which is generally what is recommended in the industry, then you get into a deeper level of ingredients. And then if you wanted to be the most stringent, which is 100 parts per million, you have every last detail of the ingredient of the product. And this is the most preferred way to provide information to your customers about a product. It's also very difficult to get to this level of detail, but again, it does help to push the manufacturer to be better. So when we see requests on a LEED submittal for material ingredient reporting, you may see things like 100 parts per million or 1,000 parts per million, and you may be asked for a health product declaration or a declare label. So this is a snapshot of what you might see in a submittal, where you're going to check the box for a health product declaration and make sure that you check the box that the documentation is attached. And you may be asked if you have a declare label for that product as well. And so we'll talk a little bit about what those documents actually are. A health product declaration is basically like an ingredient label for the product. So down to either 100 or 1,000 parts per million, you'll see the ingredients of the product listed out, its percentage makeup of the product. And then in a health product declaration, you'll see every known health hazard listed out next to the ingredient in that product. So again, with LEED and other green building certification programs, when we're focused on understanding the health impacts of products for the occupants of the building, that's why these types of documentations and documents are important. So HPDs are consistent, they're transparent, they're always submitted in a standard format, and they will include manufacturer and product information, product testing and compliance, the ingredients, and then just as we saw with the other area within EPD, third-party verified HPD and declare labels are worth 1.5 products to contribute. And that's where this comes into play, very similar to what we saw before with EPDs, is for 1 point within LEED, you need at least 20 different permanently installed products from at least 5 different manufacturers that are using at least one of the following programs. So a cradle to cradle certification, a manufacturer's inventory, which is an ingredient list, or a health product declaration like we just saw on the screen. The other area of material ingredient reporting is the declare label. And I showed you a quick example of one earlier, and here you can see it again, but just from looking at it, you understand the intention behind it is to just have a very clear way of looking at the ingredients of the product. So it identifies where a product came from, what it's made of, and then where it goes at the end of its life. LEED is very is putting a larger focus on understanding the product's entire life cycle, and also a larger focus on circularity and understanding, do we understand where this product goes at the end of its life, and can we incorporate circularity into it so that it starts back to the beginning again and that we have a lesser footprint. It does require manufacturers to disclose ingredients in their products to ensure that they're free of red list chemicals. So the Living Building Challenge program that we talked about before, these labels contribute to that, as well as LEED v4. Living Building Challenge does follow a very strict list of red list chemicals, which says basically if your product has this type of ingredient in it and it's on the red list, it's probably not going to get specified into that project. And that gives you an indication of how strict this building certification program is. But it does not stop people from going and pursuing it. We see a lot of Living Building Challenge projects on our radar still, which we absolutely love to see. As far as LEED is concerned, there are some additional questions or forms that you might be asked to fill out. And so we'll just go over those so that you're familiar with them. So these are some additional snapshots of what you might see in a LEED submittal. You will be asked if the manufacturer has a corporate sustainability report. And there is an example of the cover of ours over there on the right-hand side of the screen. You may also hear it called an ESG report. So that's the environmental, social, sustainability and governance report. There's a number of different ways that it's defined. Some organizations have a larger focus on governance, others have a larger focus on environmental sustainability or operational sustainability, and others will just call it their corporate sustainability report. You may also be asked about an extended producer responsibility program, which basically means, does the product have an end-of-life recycling program? Will the manufacturer take back the product and dispose of it properly when it's reached the end of its life cycle? So there's a snapshot there of that type of program. And then, of course, everyone's favorite is pre- and post-consumer recycled content. And you'll be able to input the percentages there within the LEED submittal as well. In looking for the recycled content, this is a snapshot of a LEED contribution document. And what you'll see here is the different pre and post consumer recycled content information, as well as the total recycled content percentage. And then you'll see some information about the manufacturing location of the product. For most manufacturers, you're not going to be able to understand or obtain information around the location of the extraction of the raw materials, because raw material supplier locations change on a regular basis whenever there's a need to change up suppliers or change up components. So typically the most level of detail you'll get is going to be the final location of manufacture for the product versus its extraction location. Now, with low emitting materials, you're going to see this called a couple of different things when you're looking at a lead submittal. So you may see it listed as VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds, which we would refer to as like a new car smell or a new building smell when you go in and you're like, it smells like fresh paint or adhesives or cleaning products. Those are VOCs, and we want to keep those to a minimum because, again, we're thinking about the health and wellness of the occupants of the building. And what LEED refers to as IEQ, or indoor environmental quality, or sometimes you'll see it as indoor air quality. But the important thing to note here is that doors and frames have off-gassing potential, and they've all been tested and certified to have low levels of chemical emissions. So they've all been Green Guard Gold certified. And that's what you need to know when you come to this checkbox on the LEED submittal, is to say doors and hardware meet these specific standards, and the supporting documentation is attached in our Green Guard Gold certification. Greenwashing is something that we come into contact with and we experience because sustainability, and other words like it, green, eco-friendly, they tend to be overused words in our industry. And there's also a tendency to have a variety of definitions as far as what we consider to be a green product. So when you're researching projects, it's really important to take a look at documents that have been third-party verified. And what that means is the manufacturer has brought on a third party to audit and validate any claims that they've made around sustainability. And this helps to provide an additional level of trust for the customer. So for LEED V4 and 4.1, transparency documents like EPDs and HPDs, they will contribute additional points if they have a third-party verification. So keep an eye out for those. You'll also want to keep an eye out for the label that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. And there's a lot to take in here, but the general understanding is this is a multi-attribute label, and what it's doing is it's taking all of the data from all of the sustainability documentation that a product may have and putting it into one place onto this multi-attribute label called Certified Environmental Facts. And this type of label is recognized in LEED project guidelines. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop for all of your LEED contributions and sustainability documentation information. We'll start to wrap up here with just a very short checklist for LEED requests. Now, I certainly appreciate that, you know, when this type of request comes across our desk, our first reaction is to panic and say, okay, there are how many hundreds or thousands of different types of products within this project? And now we have to go back through and find the information required by LEED for all of them. It can be incredibly overwhelming. And so I want to be really clear with you about the types of information and the line items that you truly need to be aware of. And it's a much shorter list than you might think. So when you get those types of requests in, read through them and then make sure you're focusing on just what's in this list. So recycled content, pre and post consumer, and that is located in your lead contribution document. Regional materials. Like I said before, most products are not going to qualify for this because LEED insists that the product's raw material extraction site and manufacturing site must be within 100 miles of the project location. So for regional materials, you're probably going to put NA in that section. The manufacturer's location, that information is found on the lead contributions document, typically near the recycled content information. Materials and resources contributions, when you see that key phrase, materials and resources, that means you'll need to provide an EPD, an HPD, or a declare label, and all of that can be located on the manufacturer's website. Low emitting materials, just like we mentioned, that will be your Green Guard Gold certifications. Those are located on the UL Spot website. UL is the program administrator for the Green Guard Gold certifications. Extended producer responsibility, or what we would call product end of life recycling program, that's located on a manufacturer's website. The sustainability report, you'll find that on a manufacturer's website. Third-party verifications, in this case, located on the Green Circle certification, Green Circle certified website within their database. And then, of course, and this is what I encourage the most out of all, is you'll need to know your sustainability contact, which is me, Amy Musanti. That's my contact information there. I exist to help you through everything that comes in on a lead submittal as it pertains to doors and hardware. So of course, always be in touch when you're working on a lead request or any other green building certification program. As far as other resources that you may want to utilize, just as you're starting to teach yourself and become more familiar with LEED, WELL, Living Building Challenge, Net Zero, and Passive House, we have developed a sustainable product menu, which is in a spreadsheet form. It's updated once a month, and it lists out every single ASA ABLOY product that has sustainable attribute, and then any type of documentation or other pertinent sustainability information that you may need when you're either researching a product in its initial stages or when you're towards the end and you're filling out all of that green building program certification. There are a number of online product databases as well, in addition to the manufacturer's website and that spreadsheet that I just showed you. UL Spot is the program administrator for environmental product declarations and Green Guard Gold certificates. Mindful Materials is an industry-wide database and aggregator for sustainable product listings. So within that cloud-based software, you can actually search through any CSI division to obtain a list of sustainable products. And then, of course, our ASA ABLOY Sustainability Online Resource Center, that's the website there. And then your most important human resource, again, which is me. So I encourage you to take a screenshot or a snapshot of this page. Again, it is my absolute pleasure and duty to help you all through your needs for sustainability documentation, as well as sustainability education and teaching the rest of your teams about the importance of sustainability and how doors and hardware can contribute to a sustainable built environment. And with that, we'll wrap up the program and we can open it up for any questions or comments.
Amy, thank you so much for such great information. I would like to say thanks to everyone for participating today. Again, reach out to Amy if she can be any direct help to you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.